Okay, so let's pick it up from here and get into coevolution, which maybe to me is my favorite subject of all. So, what coevolution is, this is another pattern of evolution where we have the unified evolution of two different species. Let me set my timer here. Okay. And for instance, specialized pollinators. So, coevolution is just so cool in so many ways because it's about life evolving together. And in some cases, it can actually be pretty weird and kind of gross, like different types of parasites. But so much of it is really cool and interesting. In particular, this story with the bee here. So anyway, let's do that one last. So there are, especially with hummingbirds, I feel like very specialized hummingbird pollinators. And in this case, this is a hummingbird that is pollinating orchids. So it's feeding from the orchid and getting food, and the orchid is benefiting by getting pollination through that process. And some of these relationships between hummingbirds and orchids is so extreme that they cannot survive without each other. They become ultra specialized. So and this is particularly important to our next unit, which is ecology, and looking at how ecosystems function and how living things rely on each other, and that and how nature works. Because if we go in and let's say we chop down these orchids, whether we want the land or we want the flowers to sell them in stores or whatever, the bird is going to die because it is totally co-evolved to feed from this orchid and has no other source of food. And then vice versa, if we went and something for whatever reason killed off these hummingbirds, whether it's through hunting or pollution or people want them for pets or whatever, then the orchid would lose its pollinator and the orchid would probably die off. And so coevolution can sometimes result in super specialization where things are totally dependent on each other. And a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand that damaging one thing is going to have an effect on others. In the case of this bat, this is a fruit bat that will feed from these fruits and flowers, and they will pollinate it in the process. And they are also totally specialized. This bat is the only pollinator for this particular fruit tree. And so if we destroy the tree, then the bat goes with it. If for whatever reason we killed off these bats, then the tree is going to die and go extinct because it has no other way of pollinating and reproducing. So this kind of shows why it's important we have to protect plants and animals for reasons that a lot of people don't think about or realize. All right, now in the case of this bee, this is really neat. This is also an orchid. And this bee is the only animal that can pollinate it, which, might be a little unusual for such a big flower. And they do see other animals come and feed from this flower, like butterflies and other types of things. So you would think it has other pollinator options. However, the pollen doesn't get on those other animals. And this one is really specialized and unusual. So in order for this flower to spread its pollen, when the bee lands, and it might have something to do with what's going on right here, it pinches the flower in a way that causes for the reproductive parts to come out, and that's what we're seeing here, and put the pollen on the back of this bee. And then when it goes to another flower, that happens again, and now the pollen can be exchanged. But only this bee causes this reaction. And again, it could be because of the way they pinch it right here when they land. But for whatever reason, only this bee causes this reaction. So it is highly specialized, and a really cool story about this orchid and this bee have co-evolved to be partners, to help each other survive, and to continue to evolve. And you guys, I would hope, it's unfortunate, but hopefully you guys have heard that bee populations are dying off, which is something we're going to talk about. And actually, in my other class, a student just did a presentation on what's going on with the bees in my environmental biology class, where we focus on stuff like ecosystems and how humans are damaging the environment and things like that. And he talked about some of the things that are causing the bees to die off, and this has been going on for a while. And we are losing our pollinating insects. And for a while, they didn't know what it was. They didn't know if it was a virus or if it was like the increase in cell phone signals, for instance. And then they narrowed it down to chemicals that are being sprayed on farms and gardens that are common on our major farms, and you can buy these chemicals at stores and spray them on your plants in your backyard. And they are killing the pollinating insects, which is a huge problem because without pollination, there are no flowers, and all flowers turn into fruit. So without flowers, without pollinators, there are no flowers, and without no flowers, there is no fruit. And so it's not just important for ecosystems and other living things, but it's also important for humans to protect and care for our plants and our pollinating insects and get rid of these chemicals that are killing them, which is a big issue and political issue that I'll be talking about in our next unit. Also, predator-prey relationships are a big part of coevolution, and we'll talk about these in Unit 5 also. And so usually I do some scenarios in class, and people basically figure it out. So as the lions, pick off like the gazelles, for instance, or impalas, or whatever this is, and kill them, the ones that escape are usually the faster, stronger, more alert ones. And they end up reproducing, and through natural selection, they pass on their traits to their babies, and the gazelles and impalas become faster and stronger and more alert over time. And so when that happens, now the prey is getting faster and more capable, and that forces the predators to evolve and adapt as well, where the faster and stronger ones are more likely to survive. And this is how where the predators actually help their prey improve through their evolution over time, and that actually pushes the predators eventually to improve in their evolution over time. And this doesn't have to just be with like speed and power. It can also deal with camouflage. And this is very easy to visualize, very much like our peppered moth story that I've talked about a number of times, where the moths had two different colors of camouflage. And in this case, we have beetles with two different colors of camouflage. So if they're hiding on a tree, then the birds are obviously going to kill off the ones that they can see, and the ones that are harder to see will survive, pass on their traits, which is what we're dealing with over here, the genetics, and over time maybe the entire species will be brown and these green ones will be completely gone. And maybe over time, let's say the climate changes and becomes more moist and suddenly there's more plant growth and moss, and now the trees are becoming more green, then maybe we would go the other way and the brown ones would slowly be killed off over time and the green ones would actually become the dominant camouflage in color. So predators, and so then I usually say, okay, and then let's say the camouflage just becomes really incredible and really hard to see. How might the birds have to evolve to see them? And usually in class, very quickly students say, well, they're going to have to improve their vision and their other senses that would help with finding these more camouflage beetles. And so the predator and prey relationship really pushes both to evolve in really amazing advanced ways. We also have really cool forms of mimicry camouflage. So to me, this is definitely up there with some of the coolest stuff in biology. So for instance, this is a moth. So mimic means to like copy. And there are a lot of organisms that have developed mimicry camouflage that helps them hide or confuse predators in different niches. And so this is actually a moth. And if you know moths, they're very fragile and vulnerable. But scientists noticed that predators were kind of not messing with them, and they're like, this is weird. Why aren't these birds or whatever, eating this moth? And then they noticed that in its habitat, in its niche, was this spider that was dangerous, and the birds didn't want to mess with it. And they started to realize, wait, this moth has actually evolved to have colors that are similar to the spider and even holds its body in a way that kind of looks like a spider. And they realized that over huge amounts of time and natural selection that the moth was evolving to kind of mimic the spider, and that was confusing predators, which was a big advantage for its survival. In this case here we have the monarch butterfly and the viceroy butterfly. And monarch butterflies are toxic to the birds that eat them. And they've actually done studies where the birds will eat 2 of them and kind of throw them up, and then they will never eat them ever again. And along their migration path are viceroy butterflies. And they may share an ancestor, but the viceroy butterfly is actually a tasty organism, as it says here, a tasty mimic to these birds. And birds will like them. But because the birds get confused because of the mimicry camouflage, they won't eat these viceroys, and it really helps protect their species, and it's just a benefit of coevolution. And there's lots of really cool forms of mimicry camouflage, like different leaf bugs of different kinds. And then this one even has things that almost look like eyes that could maybe throw off a predator. And here, really amazing leaf camouflage. I really like these ones. They really, really match these smooth sort of tropical leaves. And then there's even things like thorn bugs, which are really cool because plants have evolved these defenses of thorns to protect themselves from animals that eat their stems and things like that. And over time, these insects have co-evolved and developed this really cool mimicry camouflage and become thorn bugs. So let's look at some cool thorn bugs. So this one's interesting and weird. Here's one that's pretty cool and has a little bug, another little bug living on it. Here's just kind of a strange looking one. And then we have things like walking sticks, for instance, which are pretty famous and weird. And they've co-evolved in an environment with lots of sticks that might be laying around on the ground. And here's a little mini stick bug. This is actually a caterpillar that is totally not dangerous, but is co-evolved in an environment that has snakes. And when a bird comes and messes with it, it will swell up, and its back end looks like a snake head. And the caterpillar probably has, I would assume, no idea that it looks like a snake, but it just knows that when it swells up and kind of waves its tail or butt around, that the predators go away. And without snakes and the birds knowing what snakes are, this would never work, and it's just a really interesting behavioral adaptation, as well as some physical adaptations here that it looks like a snake's head. And then I usually say, okay, what does this obviously look like? And it looks kind of like an owl. Owls can be big-time predators in different niches, and this is a moth that has evolved to look like owl, and that's going to definitely get predators to stay away from it, because owls can be actually pretty big-time predators in their niche. And so just really cool mimicry camouflage. This is a beetle that its kind of rear end looks like a mouth with like teeth that it might scare a predator away, which is pretty cool. This is a fish that has evolved to look like a rock or coral, and here's its mouth right here. Here's another one right here. Here's its eyes, and then this is its mouth, and it's super camouflage. Lots of really interesting animals in coral have evolved to mimic coral, or even things have evolved to mimic kelp. This is a leafy sea dragon. These are big, 2.5 feet long, kind of like seahorses, but have evolved in kelp forests and have co-evolved with the kelp to develop these adaptations that help it hide from seals and other predators in their kelp environment. All right, we are going to stop this one